Welcome back to SEOleverage.com. This is Gert, and we're very often talking about all kinds of things around SEO, around online businesses, conversions, etc. Today, I would like you to take mentally one step back, look at your overall business, look at what you're actually building in terms of your brand, how you're building, how you behave when you engage with your client. And I'm very pleased to have a special guest on the show, probably one of the person that knows the most about these kinds of things I've just been talking about without knowing anything really. Christina Aldan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Gert. It's good to be here. I love chatting with you because, we have this like-minded kind of thing happening.
I do think so. We had definitely had a great time, I think, on last time we spoke when we recorded a show for your podcast, the One Key Girly Girl podcast, where we talked a little bit more about SEO. Today, I asked you to talk to us a little bit more about your background in brand strategy, emotional intelligence, mental health. We're going to touch upon a few things you have really a lot of expertise in. Could you give us a little bit of your background first to tell our listeners where you come from, how you came to this level of expertise?
I usually call myself a student, and it seems like even the more and more I learn, I become more and more a student of things. And I don't really like that word expert. It's like one of those, the more I learn, the less I know kind of things, right? I didn't take the straight and narrow path. I studied chemical engineering when I was in college. I was admitted into a very difficult chemical engineering program at an engineering school. And then I called my mom one day and I said, Mom, I'm done being in the chemistry lab. I'm done, with this acetone and these very distinct measurements. And I'm done with it. I want to go in the forest. And so I switched my majors. I dropped my scholarship and I went into ecology and environmental sciences. And through that program, I had to take a computer class. It was required that I take some kind of a computer class. And I remember sitting around in my house with my roommates, all engineers, brilliant engineers. They went on to, MIT grad school and work for state governments and brilliant people. And I would sit around and I would say, I'm flunking my CS 110 class. And they would be, wait a minute, what do you mean? I think you mean CS 201. They don't make computer classes that low, Christina. And I'm like, actually they do. And I am barely passing this computer class right now. It's really hard. I was in a class with, I went to an engineering school where it was 10 men to one woman, first of all. And then in my computer class, I was like one of two other women, young women in there. And it seemed like all of the men had been programming before. They had backgrounds, they had history. And this is my very first experience with it. So I really struggled in that computer class. And I thought computers are just not for me. Tech is way over my head and I don't get this at all. Well, it turned out that one of my first jobs out of school was with the Colorado Geological Survey. And I was surveying terrain and I worked on this map project with them. And then I went into a contract with the National Park Service where I did surveying their roads and I got to see nearly all the national parks in the country. It was a lot of work. It was a contract job that had me working sometimes even 80 hours a week. It was a lot of travel and a lot of work. And I drove a vehicle with my fellow coworkers with 26 ultrasonic sensors. It had Waze cameras. We looked at the pitch and the angle and the conditions of the road, and we took pictures. And the person's job that I took, she wasn't working at this company anymore because she had gone off. She had some kind of a contract with Google, like taking pictures of roads or something. And we were like, I don't know what she's doing. Well, then later it turned out to be Google Maps, right? Like one of the largest.
Street View came from somewhere.
Street View came from somewhere. And so, that's that same company who made those vehicles and the data collection vehicles. That's what I was working with federal highways. I had this contract with the National Park Service. And so I was working working with computers. We had 9 computers in this van on an ambulance carriage that was all custom made. All of the pins were custom made, everything from the computers, the sensors, and we're collecting all this data. Mm-hmm. Well, from there, I get burnt out from that job, and I wasn't a very good data collector, as it turns out. But I burnt out from that job, and it turns out that I really wasn't as horrible at computers as I thought. And the more I started playing with computers, the more I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. In fact, computers are another medium for creating things. And so I started creating websites, and then I started creating websites for other people. And then I went into business for myself, doing some freelance stuff, doing websites. I used Dreamweaver back in the day, the Dragon. Well, then what happened eventually is that kind of evolved, and people would say, Christina, I want you to build me a website. And I said, great. Why don't you send me your logo, send me your creative, your stuff that's worked before. And they would send me their business card, and that would be purple. And then they wanted a green website. And then they had their pamphlet, which would be red. And then their logo would be blue. And I would go, wait a minute, hold on. This isn't working here. Let's get some kind of a brand strategy behind this, and really kind of think about the messaging that you're putting out. And sure, I can create social media content and put up Facebook ads, but if they're not converting, and if your website's not set up and your website's not compliant for Google Ads, then what's the point? You're just giving money to Google and you're not making any money. So that's kind of how it all evolved, from chemical engineering to ecology to
quite a journey.
Government work to tech. And now, here I am, young Asian American girl who grew up in poverty in the shores of Lake Superior in Michigan, to now having spoken on all 7 continents, and I travel and I speak about these things at conferences worldwide and give workshops about how we're connecting our products and services with our ideal clients in meaningful ways. And people are educated now, right? People can find anything online to back up their existing biases or where they're going, right? So it's important that as a business, as a small business, as a medium-sized business, even as a large business, we're thinking about that messaging. We're really living our values through our branding and through our messaging. And we're able to connect with those ideal clients to actually sell them the products, because people can, all those days back in the day where it used to be like, today and today only, boy, do I have a deal for you. People can smell that stuff, these sleazy tactics. And they can just simply look you up. They can look up your founders. They can look up your CEO. They can see what people are posting on Twitter, on Facebook, and your marketing campaigns. Are they in alignment with the same values that your clients and your customers want? It's easy.
There's a lot of information in there, and I want to break it down a little bit. When people hear branding, or if I ask 5 of my clients what branding means, I think I'm going to get 5 different answers. What's your answer?
For me, it's that consistent messaging, how you're showing up across all your platforms consistently. That's what your brand is. So even an individual has a personal brand, right? Even if you're working within a company, I work with, again, in tech, a lot of programmers, you have a personal brand. You might not understand it, and you might not be driving that conversation, but your personal brand is there. And the same thing with small businesses and businesses. That conversation is already happening online. And so it's important for you to make sure that you're showing up in a consistent way. If you're on TikTok, if you're on Instagram, if you're on LinkedIn, in your brochures, in how if you have a DevOps team, how your DevOps people are standing on stage and promoting your products, how your people are showing up at conferences, at booths, and marketing your products and services. That brand message has to be the same consistently on digital and analog platforms.
I think this was probably 5 years ago. I saw a video of Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, he always like, he's a thought leader, always says like what's going to happen in 10, 20 years. And he obviously said, yeah, all those social media tricks and hacks and everything will be gone. The only thing that's going to be staying around is brand. So people, he said like people would be really making decisions based. I mean, they do obviously also right now make decisions in the grocery store based on the brands already. Yes. But he was like, a lot of things are going to go away. Voice assistants are going to choose based on the brand, what they recommend people should be buying and where they should get it, etc. So branding seems to be here to stay. Is this mostly visual, like a visual thing where you just want your videos and your images be recognizable, that this comes from you, or does this go beyond this actually?
Well, and that's the thing, a lot of times because the language can be very specific and it can also be very general. It, like you said earlier, it means different things to different people. SEO means different things to different people. People will come to me and they'll say, Christina, we need SEO. And I'll say, okay, well, there are, about 288 triggers in the Google algorithm alone. Like, let's think about what SEO means to you and what it means to me. Like, you can give me money and I can go do the SEO, but is it really going to meet your goals? What are you really trying to do? Well, we're trying to get traffic. Oh, okay. Well, that's a different thing then. We'll use SEO to do that. And then also we'll use content creation. We'll use, blogging. We'll use podcasting. Maybe we'll use speaking if a speaking platform makes sense. But really, it all comes down to what is that goal and how are you showing up consistently. So my very first thing, what I start with people with brand strategy, is core values. What are your core values at your company? How are those core values being shown through your logo, through your management style, through your leadership style, through your social media posts, your Google ads, your blog posts? All of these things create a picture of your brand, and really understanding how to roll those things out. Listen, I see people make these mistakes, these expensive mistakes. Somebody I had spoken to a couple months ago, they said, I said, well, what works so far? What's been working for you and what hasn't? Well, what's been working for us is we've been spending $25,000 a year on Google ads. And I said, okay, cool. So what does that get you? And they said, we think it helps with our ranking on Google. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's expensive to be ranked. Are you actually getting sales? Are you making money off of that? That's a different question. Even in your training, are you, I've met with a lot of startups. I've worked with a lot of startups. And I remember at one point I sat down with somebody and I said, how's it going? And she said, oh man, what a busy weekend. This is a health and wellness company. We had such a busy weekend. Our developers were really great. They had a final push to get our MVP out the door. We were on call. My co-founders were, on the line signing. And I paused and I said, now, wait a minute. You told me that the first thing that we talked about was your 3 top core values. And that was health and wellness and taking care of your culture and, delivering a product that is a good product. But now what you just told me is the opposite of that. You just told me that you didn't pay your developers for them working overtime through the weekend. You yourself are exhausted and didn't sleep much, and your co-founder didn't sleep much. And so you're showing up differently. Here you're saying your core values are one thing, but there's not consistency in the brand and how you're presenting. And people aren't going to trust you. People aren't going to trust you. Forget it. They're definitely not going to be your clients. They won't be your customers.
I think it's a really interesting, a couple of interesting points. So we resonate here, I think, very much to like defining what the goal is, what you actually want to achieve. So the first call, right, with just an SEO agency, but the first call is definitely with a client. who joins our program, where we then every couple of weeks send them updates. The first call is about what you want to achieve, and then let's see how SEO can play a role in getting you closer to this. And then they open up the application. It says goal column traffic, goal column leads, right? Goal column sales. So everybody who's working on this project and the client knows always what they're trying to achieve. And then we can assign the role of SEO, and then they might have paid ads and they might have social media and content marketing and whatever. But we just want to make sure that we know how we can then bring them closer to their goal from an SEO point of view. So I really like that you focus a lot on this here.
It's multifaceted, right? And it's different for every company. That's why I don't do, hey, buy my blueprint program and buy my ClickFunnels. This will guarantee you 6 figures in 30 days. Like, I don't do any of that, because it has to be customized. It has to be customized for your industry, for how your team works, especially in tech. In tech, we find a lot of neurodiversity in team members. Maybe your funding is different. Maybe you have a capital partner. Maybe you're crowdfunded. All of these things have to be taken into account when you are rolling out your marketing and thinking about what tools that you want to use. Podcasting is a really good way to spread the word. For some people, maybe writing a book or writing articles in large publications, as long as you have a strong call to action and you have a good newsletter system or email system set up, then that's really good for some people. We can convert and get a lot of good clients out of that. It just depends, and it has to be unique. Never trust anybody who says, "Oh, I can get you ranked on the first page of Google," or "I can help you make 7 figures in 30 days." Well, what they don't tell you is that it's a lot of work to set all that up. I did it as one person, sure. And you also probably have a life partner at home managing the kids, and you probably have a very data driven mindset, right? You have a lot of time to monitor tools and things like that. They don't tell you all of that.
I still have to see one of those people who actually really did it in a month. Maybe they went public with it in a month. Maybe they've been working on it for 5 years. It's really interesting what you can see out there. But what was really interesting here for me, and this is definitely something we can also see with our team, is that branding ultimately has a very big internal component. So most of the people I talk to, when I ask them about branding, they say, look, all our social media ads have the same styling, we have the same font, we have the same colors, we have a similar theme we talk about, and this is all good. But we have been doing a lot of work, not really even thinking about the branding behind it, but we're doing a lot of work because one of the core values we definitely have is communication.
Yes.
The communication, there are SEO agencies who try to minimize contact to clients. And I have usually 8 calls a day, right?
You gotta have that collaborative environment.
It's completely different, right? And then like 20% of my week is talking to my team and training them and communicating how we can make this better for this client. How can we come up with new ideas for that client? Now we have the R&D team where I get together twice a week with them and say, okay, what can we do here? What can we test there? This is what's working here for this client. Can work there with 40 projects or something like this we want to work on. Yes. It's just, there's a lot of communication, but we have this both internally, and everybody knows communication is key. But this communication is transmitted. We send clients updates every week. We proactively tell them what's going well, what is a challenge, what we are doing, so they just are informed of what's happening here. So there's this really big internal component to make sure that all the entire team, the entire company essentially really is streamlined inside out, essentially, right?
And I'm all about emotional triggers, right? Emotional intelligence is my jam. I'm a student of emotional intelligence and how we're connecting with people and building rapport and creating emotional triggers to get people to buy our products and services. I'm fine with that as long as they're ethical and they're not taking advantage of, like, say, I just watched this documentary on about sugar in the U.S. and how the marketing and the lobbying and studies funded by sugar companies and it's just incestuous. It's really bad. That's why we have so many health problems here. All the misinformation. As long as we're not doing that, then I'm okay with prompting people, hey, check this out. We really can only offer this for the next 5 days because our team can only take on this much, right? And so you got to get on this deal now. Or if it's a meaningfulness or a purposeful driven or a shared value that where I do a lot of work around mentorship and mental health. I don't mind, connecting on shared values like that. That'll trigger some emotions. Sure, I'm cool with that. Your branding, your visual representation, it should match that. It's just one key. Brand strategy is how you're living that and how you're rolling that creative content out. It's good that all of your social media posts look the same. That's good branding. And when you send your employees to a conference, are they talking about your business in negative ways, or are they talking about your business in ways that represent that visual style? Maybe your branding is light and you have pale sky blue and sage green, and you're a health and wellness company. Well, are your people showing up to meetings going, oh, I'm so exhausted, I haven't slept, or are they grumpy, or are they complaining about the company culture? That's really going to affect your brand strategy as well. Those analog, offline, non-digital interactions, all those touch points are representations of your branding and your brand. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned a point that was definitely on my agenda for this call as well, as emotional intelligence. You obviously speak on this topic a lot. I remember a TED Talk where you brought up an example. I think this was like the grocery store, and where there are people who naturally interact with the other people in the line, and then there are people probably like me, like looking down on the phone waiting. But it's interesting. I never thought this might be. I think I'm personally probably engaging differently online than in real life, so to speak. So I'm the person taking in with clients, with team members all the time, and sending them an email. Look, I saw this. This reminded me of our last conversation, and like really proactive online. And then I'm in line in the supermarket. I don't talk to anybody. What's that?
Well, it's like you said, right? I took 8 meetings and I'm exhausted, and now I got to go to the store. I don't want to make small talk. I've already been forcing myself professionally. I also, people don't think a lot of times that introversion means how we recharge, right? Extroversion means when we're around other people, we recharge. So our founder at Arana Software, he's an extrovert, and we'll go to conferences together. I'm an introvert, and we'll both be speaking. 2 very different styles, right? So for him to get charged up and energized before his talk, he'll go around an hour before, he'll have lunch with people, he'll talk to all the vendors, visit all the vendors, so that by the time his time comes up and he's got to be on that stage, he's ready to go, right? He's energized and good to go. That sounds exhausting to me. So, before I get on the stage, before I teach a workshop, before I'm delivering a keynote, you're going to see me hanging back. I might have breakfast at the hotel. I'm going to, go sit at the back of my room very quietly. If it's a regular talk, I'll sit at the back of the room very quietly, maybe an hour and a half, my headphones in on silent, noise canceling, just kind of getting in the zone, getting a feel for the room, do a tech check. That's how I recharge, so that by the time it's time for me to go on stage, the lights go down, I'm plugged in, the AV person gives me the signal, then I can go, okay, I've recharged, I've grounded myself, I've gotten energized, and now I'm ready to interact. Wow. But, there's a thing about our brains, especially with like COVID brain, especially with the day repeating over and over again. Our brains have this quality where it compresses time, we get foggy. And so my most recent workshop and talk are about how to overcome that, how our brains encode, store, and retrieve memories, and how we can really set ourselves up for success despite brain fog, despite neurodivergence, despite all these challenges. If you're an introvert, or if you have Zoom fatigue where you've been looking at somebody's head. It's one thing if we're in person, right? If we're in person, I can look around, I'm doing this while you're talking, my brain does. When we're on Zoom and there's 15 other heads or 40 other heads, it's very intense. And our brains process those data differently. So we get Zoom fatigue. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, this whole topic. I did some reading. I definitely not a lot about emotional intelligence in general and how to connect better with people. Obviously, I think the more virtual this gets, and this seems to be a trend. We have the metaverse, we have pandemic, everybody at home, everybody used to doing usual work or interactions at home. We meet friends via Zoom rather than going to the house. A lot of things change, right? So this personal connection is still a necessity, right? So I consciously try to get this across for us, for my team, with my team, for them as a team, with the clients as well. This natural connection. Today is Wednesday. On Friday, we're going to get with the local group that's here, living here in Spain. We get to go for lunch just to get those connections going as well. How can we use emotional intelligence to connect better with our team and with our clients?
Yeah, I think that with our clients, it comes down to understanding the customer journey. Where are they in that buying cycle? In that, the customer journey, I always map that out for people when we start to work, because sometimes what happens is we're trying to connect our products, connect our services with our customers, and they're not even ready. They're still over here in the awareness phase, or they're just researching, and you're trying to push them to convert, and it's not time yet. So they're going to need different content, different brand messaging, a different strategy if they're in this early awareness phase of the buyer's cycle. And you really got to be sensitive to knowing where they're at, and then meeting them where they are, and then offering the right information so that they can educate themselves about your products and services. Otherwise, you're going to come off as pushy, right? If you don't follow up, and I always offer a second follow-up too in the customer journey. So when you're mapping that out, you do that follow-up at the end, but I always add a follow-up to the follow-up as well. How are you offering more value to them? Because the easiest clients are the ones that you already have, right? So as long as you can keep that relationship nurtured and keep it going, they're going to come back when they have other products, when they have other needs, when they have other things that they're going to need help with. So make sure you're following up with your employees and your teams. I think that the concepts of communication have really not changed. While we may be more in a digital world, it's still the same. It's how are you feeling? It's sticking to focused topics and not letting people go put their ranty pants on and go off the rails, right? There's a nuance to communication, and there's a nuance to culturally competent communication as well. So across different countries, I'm a very hands-on person when I do my workshops. And so I have to really adjust my presentation. If I'm in Greece, for example, which the Greeks are my people, like they love to debate, they love to get into it. They're very direct. Same thing in the Netherlands, very, very matter of fact, very direct in how they communicate, as opposed to like maybe a talk that I've delivered maybe in Norway, where people are very polite and they don't raise their hands. In the US, there's a discussion, people give their opinions. It's not that way. The first time I ever gave a talk in Oslo, the audience gave me a nice polite clap, and they all stood up in single file, walked out of my room. And I thought, oh my God, everybody hated me. I got great reviews. I got fantastic reviews. It's just because it's how they communicate. So across, Zoom, across social media, we have to make sure that our messaging, again, just really always comes back to those core values. Are we, if it's important to have diversity and inclusion, then are we communicating with diversity and inclusion? Are there asynchronous communications? Are we only scheduling meetings for people in the Western hemisphere and not the Eastern. All of these things have to be considered. Some people are better readers. Some people are more at audio. Some people are better at video. You have to make sure that you're communicating across multiple channels in the same messaging, in the same way, and it's available to all of your employees. That really is what brings that cohesion, because then people feel informed, right? They feel like they know what's going on, even if they are working remote and they're not there locally to jump in to lunch in Spain.
So what I'm hearing is, so on the one hand, I have this image in mind with a Spanish plug of one of my woodworking tools, and or a UK. I bought a woodworking tool from the UK, and I have this UK plug I'm trying to put into my Spanish outlet, right? And this was what I got reminded of when you said we sometimes try to connect our products with the customer rather than taking in where they are in their journey, which I really like, and then see, okay, do I have something for them, or is this maybe early? I had a client reach out to us now 2 years after he initially reached out to us, because now the product was a match. We have a client who said, look, I love your product. In June, we are going to be ready for you, right? Yeah. We just reached out today. We have another client where I said, look, I think we are pretty much there, but let's do this migration first. And then we check out the new website and see what this does, what we can do with SEO, right?
And so people appreciate that.
Absolutely.
They appreciate that about you, because you're living your core values of being authentic, of integrity, right? I mean, I tell people sometimes, like, look, I could take your money, we can run this, but your website is crap. It needs to be rebuilt. And so it doesn't really make much sense for us to do this until you redesign your website and get your developers on it and make it accessible and make it Google compliant for your ads. I work with different industries, and one of those industries is in plastic surgery, cosmetology. And so, the health industry, doctors, lawyers, insurance companies, they are held to higher standards as far as marketing online and what information they can put out there. And so that's important. And then people appreciate that. Right? They appreciate that. They appreciate if I tell them, look, we can design this website for you. We can do this and develop this. But, our level of security and robustness in how we do websites, it might not be good for you as an individual person who's just a simple little Wix website might be good for them. Okay, go get that set up. And then come back, and then we can work on things. People appreciate that, and they always come back when you're authentic.
Absolutely. It makes sense, and it's interesting that it's always also the case for one-on-one communication, right? So when you're with the team, by the time you show an interest and you really want to know what's going on in their world and where they are and what they're going through. Everybody's going through a lot of stuff apart from work. So work is not only the only thing in their head, obviously. But then also the communication works better, the output is better, the performance is better. So definitely also interesting to just get a feeling, because we're in this pandemic. Life has changed, lots of changes. I hear more and more. I'm part of, I think, 3 different masterminds, 2 for SEO, 1 for businesses. And I hear this theme coming up about really mental health. So people struggling, you talk about brain fog, people just really thinking, okay, I'm not performing at my highest level anymore. I'm not where I used to be in my normal routine. My routine is completely changed, and this has affected me in ways I didn't even anticipate. Like you say, 10 hours on Zoom every day might not be the most fun part of a week, right? What do you think are the main challenges people are going through in these days right now?
Well, I think the things that bothered them before bother them now, only now. It's, times 10. So it's things like, if you're feeling imposter syndrome, I just finished the first draft of my memoir of, my whole life I've felt like an imposter. And so I talk about the ways that I kind of overcame those things at different stages in my life. And if you're feeling like an imposter at your work, that maybe you're going to be found out at any moment because you're maybe not as good as you think you are, everybody else thinks you are. Now it's just more exacerbated because a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times when we move from an in-office scenario to a remote scenario, we end up working ourselves more because we think, all right, we're here in my computer. I'm totally accessible. If somebody else has access to your calendar, they think, all right, well, you're here. You don't have to have that half an hour to walk in between meetings or buildings. I'm just going to schedule you back to back to back to back to back with no breaks. Mm-hmm. People are working past normal hours and on the weekends, and it's really easy to get burnt out, especially if there's drama or pain outside of my office doors. Maybe I want to hide in my work where I know I can be effective and I'm feeling more valuable. And putting those limits on ourselves only comes from self-awareness, and there are 4 different buckets for emotional intelligence. It's awareness of self, awareness of others, management of self, and management of others. Mm-hmm. And the good news about emotional intelligence is that there are 26 different facets of that. So if, there are a few different facets about awareness of self, looking in the mirror and self-management and understanding your emotions. We have I think it's something like 465 times a day that we switch emotional states, the average human. Think about that. It's a lot of emotional whiplash, And so being aware of where you're at in that moment is important, because if you're not, you might take out your stress on your kids. You might snap at somebody in a meeting. You might start a burner Twitter account and go start trolling people to get out your anger.
Never thought about it.
Right? I just did a podcast interview where we were talking about that. That anger needs an outlet. Frustration needs an outlet, needs a physical outlet. And if you don't do that, it's going to turn inward. That's called depression, or it's going to go outward. And, we call that, with my 10-year-old, we call that going volcano. You've been letting it build up and build up and build up, and then you just kind of explode on whoever's nearby. And neither of those things are healthy. So making sure that, that you're managing, you have that self-awareness of where you're at, and you're kind of tempering your emotions. If you need 15 minutes in between Zoom meetings, then make sure you're padding those meetings. If you're a leader and you say that health and wellness is important, then make sure you model that. And if you take a vacation, you actually take a vacation and you unplug. Of course, you're going to be there in case of emergencies, but let people know I'm only answering unless it's emergencies. Set some kind of system up and really model that behavior from the top down, so that your employees then don't feel the need to overwork, and they can close down their office at the end of the workday and not overwork on weekends for free.
It's definitely. I can certainly confirm this. So what I'm hearing is you need to set some or give yourself some space to really unwind. You can't obviously do much more work than we're already busy probably in the office anyway. You can't do much more just because you're now at home. Probably on the contrary, you don't have those social interactions anymore. You don't have those natural pauses anymore from one meeting to the next one, etc. And it's just the next call already waiting on Zoom, and you just switch off, switch on, and you should be performing at your best. It can be crazy. Personally, I definitely had to just block out these pauses in my calendar and say, okay, this is on Friday. There's no meeting at all. I don't meet anybody on Friday. This is just for me to do some work and not have anything with. I usually don't work too much on weekend. I might be reading some Google patterns or whatever is fun for me. But it's really not too much work on the weekend either. But I know Monday to Thursday is full of calls, is communication. This is one of our core values, and I encourage the team as well to kind of block those things a little bit together and definitely have some space really to unwind. There was a lot of really good information here. I really appreciate you taking all this time. We talked about branding, we talked about emotional intelligence, we talked about mental health. The common theme I'm hearing in all those topics that are not really related, but still they are at some point, is once you break things down into on a one-to-one basis, be this the brand talking to one customer in a certain situation, be this the team leader talking to a team member in their situation, or just checking emotional states. I notice with my kids as well, the emotional states are very often very different. And once you have this space, create this space to really be aware of my state, their state. Okay, I'm really tired. They come home from school.
Right.
They want to play. How can we put this into sync and really match the plug with the outlet in some way, in one way or another, or find the time to really unwind and synchronize, I think is really, really important in all kinds of aspects. Thank you so much, Tim. Definitely sure many of our listeners are going to want to know more about you. They're going to go to YouTube, definitely search for a name, see some talks. Where can they get in touch with you in the best possible way?
I am Lucky Girly Girl everywhere on the interwebs. It's LuckyGirlie, Lucky Girly Girl, everywhere on the internet. And my DMs are open for now. I'm not, I don't know, maybe one day they will be closed, but so far, knock on wood, I'm okay there. And I love to talk to people about emotional intelligence and speaking and mentorship, and especially mental health.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina Aldan. Lucky Girly Girl. We're going to link this in the show notes. The episode is going to also contain a written summary over at seoleverage.com/podcast. This is episode 85. Thank you so much, Christina. I hope we can have you back in the future at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you.